Welcome to Bleach Revisited. I am Carker Gold, your host of this series in which we will be reading every single chapter of the Bleach manga, providing critical analysis of the art and the narrative, as well as personal response to each of these chapters. We'll also be discussing how this chapter connects to the rest of the manga as a whole. As usual, we begin these videos with a reading of the chapter that we're discussing for the episode. This is chapter 103, Dominion. Fifth Company, Special Detention Cell 1. Rangiku. What are you? I found this in Captain Eisen's room. It's addressed to you. Captain Eisen? For me? That night. It's a good thing it was my captain who found it. Anyone else would have submitted it as evidence and you wouldn't have gotten it. I don't know what it says, but as an assistant captain, you should be honored to know that your captain's last words were for you. Read it with appreciation. Thank you, Rangiku. Miss Hinamori, if you are reading this letter, it means I was unable to return. I've caused you much grief. There are no words to express my gratitude to you. Captain Eisen. I never spoke to you about my concerns, but that was only because I did not want to get you involved. I hope you will forgive me for involving you now. What? I am probably no longer alive, so to you, whom I trust more than anyone, I reveal all that I've discovered here. This is Bleach. Chapter 103. Dominion. That is Rangiku Matsumoto. What? What's causing? This insane spiritual pressure! Darn it! Run! Whoever it is, I'm sure we don't want to meet him. We've got to cover some ground before the enemy finds us. Yeah. Yes. He's finally here. Let's see. Which one is it? Something's not right. We've run and run, but we're not putting any distance between ourselves and the enemy. It's as if I have a sword in my throat. Hanataro! What are you doing? I'm sorry. My strength. It's like looking after a baby. Ah! No. Is it you? What's the matter? Are you just going to stare at me? What? What was that? What was that murderous intent? No. Murderous intent alone couldn't have... You are Ichigo Kurosaki, are you not? How do you know my name? Who are you? Oh, didn't Ikaku tell you? He's tough, I guess. You'll find out if you can stay alive long enough to face him. What's his name? I am Kenpachi Saraki, captain of the 11th Company. I'm here to kill you or die. And this is a special box seat there. You know, special box seat. Let me get on. Special box seat. And that is it for this reading of Chapter 103, Dominion. I am still getting used to the new manga reader that I'm using, but with this chapter specifically, there were two different two-page spreads, and I had to do it to him. Like this one, it was egregious, especially because it's Kamaji's talking. It's supposed to be this big reveal of his face, like straight on, and the page we only had on the digital reader was just the right side, so you only got to see part of his hair. And of course, the same thing here, where it's this big reveal of him on the next page. It's just like a little bit of his cloak. So I will say that I'm using a new reader, and I'll be talking about the pages in double page spread like this as I go through them. Though that said, I guess I can take it out of double, but this is what it would look like in the volume, I guess. But yeah. So we'd be here. Yeah, right, left. Okay. Losing my mind for a second here. Not used to looking at the two-page spreads as you would in the volume if you had it open to you. I mean, I was thinking about maybe talking about it like that going through, because then you would have in that format, but maybe I'll just hold off on that. I don't know. I'm still ironing this out, folks, but hopefully it offers a little bit of a better reading experience. Nevertheless, let us talk about this chapter. Let us talk about Chapter 103, Dominion. Let's discuss the art, the narrative, a little bit of my personal response, everything going on. So we open on Hinamori Momo, and as we know, she's pretty distraught over Aizen's death. Surprising here is that we find out that Fifth Company also has a detention cell, so maybe every company has detention cells. And this is only detention cell 1, so oof, every company gets a prison. Isn't that a great soul society? This is the heaven that you want to go to. Anyway, Momo is clearly like cried her eyes out. She's got these really dark kind of lines, circles under her eyes. She hasn't slept or rested, and she's looking pretty worn down and dejected. I mean, the man that she was assumably closest to, and her own boss, was just murdered, and she is now put in prison, despite being pretty sure that she's right. So, bad day for Momo. I actually heard a thing where the reason why you get those circles under your eyes and stuff is whenever you're awake longer and you're tired, you touch your face a lot and it actually ruptures the blood vessels under your eyes, and that's why that's the case. Apparently, it's just over rubbing your eyes. Anyway, so we could actually maybe our first real serious interaction here between Matsumoto and really any other character, but especially Momo. So Momo is very looking out of sorts. I love the kind of sketchiness in her eyes. I don't know. There's like this real like she feels like she's almost about to turn to dust. And of course I like that also that this page does a pretty good job. Ooh, see, I'm trying to learn this program. I just scroll up with my arrow keys. This page does a good job of setting her behind bars, and so I like that the bars here at the very top like fade into like the black paneling here, and that serves as even like a bar for like the rest of this. But yeah, it almost seems like these would be splitting the panel, but then yeah, we see her behind bars, and like there's this moment where they see each other not behind bars, and then she's behind bars again as she's being slipped this, and so it's just I think effective use of the page in general to do that. Of course, Matsumoto, we get her. She found this in Aizen's room, which is interesting. Um, like what was she doing in Aizen's room is, I guess, a question. Though, she does work with. She's Hitsugaya's vice captain, right? And so maybe Hitsugaya had her to go investigate Aizen's room to go and see if she could find anything. And so she found this letter, nevertheless. But yeah, we get to see a little bit more of Matsumoto's design. Obviously, tons of cleavage is one of the first things most people will notice, but I think there's a few other elements that are worth mentioning. I mean, she's got the ball. She's got a lot of like typical sort of like, hey, this character's hot, isn't she? Sort of stuff going on. Um, but that all said, I do like that she kind of has her sash kind of all wrapped to the side, has her what is it, the lieutenant's badge on that. She has this kind of scarf or this I was about to say ribbon. It's more like a scarf. Um, Regardless, she's a pretty done up kind of look, whereas obviously compared to Hinamori, who's very much just kind of dressed like a normal Soul Reaper outside of her hair ornamentation. It's pretty significantly kind of different projections of their sexuality. It doesn't really, that's not something to really talk too much in this space here, but I do like that there's like non-animosity really between them. That like Momo isn't like trying to immediately call out Matsumoto for like stupid around in Aizen's room. Like she doesn't immediately get jealous or anything like that. I really do like the kind of longer hair here draping under the shoulder and kind of having that draping kind of sensation to it, that flow to it. Kubo just enjoying drawing hair, which I think you'll find that Kubo starts to like drawing cloth and hair a lot more in these different ways, and you see a lot of that in like the different styles that these characters have. Of course, yeah, she says it was her captain who found it, so okay, that's what I thought. It was good thing it was her captain. That's why I was like, okay, was she there? But no, it was Hanataro himself, and so he made sure that Momo would get to see it too. So, it's kind of like, again, we're getting more of these hints that not Hanataro, it was Hitsugaya. We're getting more and more hints that Hitsugaya cares about Momo and like cares to let her know this. Chances are Hitsugaya probably read this letter. I don't know because I don't know if it's still sealed or not. I think he hasn't. I think he's actually like that level of respect for Momo and maybe even Aizen. We haven't really gotten a lot from Hitsugaya as far as Aizen goes. I know he suspects Ichimaru again, of course, in the third company, but yeah, like it's pretty wild because Hitsugaya is supposed to be this genius, and you'd think, oh man, Aizen sure he wrote like a letter before he died. Well, let me get that to Momo. So obviously the idea is that it should have been submitted as evidence, and at the very least Matsumoto doesn't know what it says, right? Um, yeah. It seems that it was addressed, of course, to her. And so yeah, it doesn't seem like it was sealed, or if it was sealed, it was resealed. So she does unseal it. That's what I thought. Nevertheless, I like we close in on her expression, her hands, all of that as she's reading over the last things that Aizen has left her. That largely he's left her out of things because he didn't want to bother her, but he's been involved with this whole conspiracy, right? He's been investigating things, assumably, and he's been trying to figure everything out, and he expected that he would die, right? And so this is why he wrote this, is that he's going to reveal everything that he's discovered. And so now we can assume Momo is in on the loop too, because if you remember, Aizen did voice a couple of his concerns with Renji. And assumably, he might have told Renji a few other things that we, as the reader, didn't get to hear. But nevertheless, Renji knows things, but he is out of commission right now, right? And so this adds another kind of person that can carry on Aizen's will, that can carry on the information that Aizen had about this conspiracy. So it's kind of interesting. Like now we have another person that has this information, but she's imprisoned, and as you could probably tell, Momo isn't exactly the person to trust with this as much. So you have to wonder, like, why isn't Aizen going to people in power Does he just not trust them? Does he not like have that? Because you know, it was very clear that Aizen and Memo had kind of a close connection where he could probably entrust her with this, right? Her being his vice captain. But clearly, it's pretty shocking stuff, and we get that from Momo's change in expression here. Again, we're continuing the series where we would have a character displayed from the Soul Society, a vice captain or captain, as one of our chapter covers, and so this is the one for Matsumoto Renkiku. We get to see more of like that belt setup that I was talking about. This is her, you know, her badge for her division and being a lieutenant and all that. She's got her nails done, you know, looking nice, doing well. I'm gonna zoom out so that out so that we can actually get the full picture here. But yeah, I think her design is solid. I really do like the variety of designs ultimately. Um, and as much as like somebody could probably be like, oh, a sex appeal character, etc., I think Matsumoto's already done a good bit to really establish that she's not that typical kind of character, that there's a little bit more to her. And so, yeah, I think the character is pretty interesting. Nevertheless, we do not sit much with her for the rest of this chapter as we move back to our other characters in the Seirete, up closer to the Senzaiku, right? We've just kind of covered these stairs. And again, that spiritual pressure is like coming down on them. I really like that this is just the insides of the like the shading here is used to kind of establish that too. And then we close in and everything's getting tighter. Like the lines just used to do that. It's pretty effective. Of course, you know, I love this. This is a great kind of setup. We do have like the little jingling of these bells that are at the end of each of the points of Kenpachi's hair. And I will refer to the character as Kenpachi, even though he is Zaraki, I guess is technically his name. It's a little bit too easy to just refer to him as Kenpachi, which is what I've gotten used to calling him. So if I ever talk about Kenpachi, I'm usually talking about this character. That's important. We'll come to learn Kenpachi is the title of the commander, not necessarily a name that's used. It's one that's taken on. But that'll be made more explicit coming forward. So that's why it's important to know that I mean Zaraki whenever I mention Kenpachi most of the time. Anyway, I was excited to really get to this panel. I love that we get our characters like spaced out. Of course, Hanataro lagging behind. And yeah, I love this panel. The kind of just the skeletal inks, you know, coming around Ichigo as if he has a sword in his throat. No matter how quick they run, they're not putting any distance between them and the danger, right? That it's like Kenpachi's essentially set his sights on them and they can't escape. I love how like absolutely haggard they all look, like totally stressed. It's really good stuff. Also, like having foregrounded here, then he sees, you know, Hanataro fall behind him, he runs to go pick him up, and then we get, you know, Zaraki completely in the shadows and like looking at them. I wish this was set up like, you know, because it is bottom right of the page. I wish it was like maybe even top left so you'd be looking down at the page as a whole, you know, because I think it could be kind of hard maybe to discern this, though I think the scar and the eye and like the rest of the shading does help. But we know also, because we saw him earlier looking over, we kind of know it's him, right? And I just love how ominously he's, you know, presented here, just in the shadow. I think this moment especially, you know, he sees Hanataro, he's like, nope. He sees, you know, Kanji's like, no. He sees Ichigo, and we get that close up. And like this, like, real close in, like he's been far away the entire time, and as soon as we get to this next page, you know, he's here, as if he's like right there. So Ichigo's like gets like that sensation like someone's right behind him. He flips and turns, and you know, Zaraki's all the way up here. And yeah, we get that double page, which I will go back to doing. So yeah, here's the 2-page spread where we finally get Ichigo acknowledging Zaraki, And yeah, he's just crouched there, ready to go. And you love it. Like, he's just been up here watching them this entire time. Um, and yeah, this is, you know, let me go back from being double. I like that, like the eyes being on the other sides of the page, and just gonna stare at me. Now he's already feels like he's behind Ichigo. I love just the silhouetting. Lots of really good use of the darks and lights here. And I love especially this gives you the sense that there should be someone there behind Ichigo as he's like really thrown by this, and then immediately he gets stabbed. Right, this is very violent, and in the way that like we see like Ichigo like absolutely terrified, and it looks like Zaraki's right there getting coated in blood, but no, he's not there at all. It's just his killing intent is so great that like that moment of locking eyes made Ichigo feel as if he was stabbed through the heart, and Zaraki's to blame. I do like the color kind of washing here as he's, it's not all black, it's this gray as he's clutching at his chest and wondering if that was just murderous intent or like what's going on or the nature of Zaraki's abilities. And then he is behind Ichigo, right? And I love that he takes the moment to verify, doesn't just come down slicing, and we get that flashback to Ikaku. And yet another double page, which this is, whenever I got to this page on my other reader, I was like, okay, I just have to go find one that I can actually read the full page spreads on. And I do love this. This is a great spread, right? Of Zaraki Kenpachi, presenting himself. We finally get to see him up close. We finally get this confrontation between Ichigo and Kenpachi that we have been sort of looking forward to, or that's been kind of presented to us as an inevitability, right? Yeah, and I'll take this time to talk a little bit about Zaraki's design. We haven't really seen too much of his sword yet, which we'll get to that whenever we get to that. But just, I love that his Shihakusho, his robes are all frayed at the edges and torn up. It's like clear that he's constantly in fights. He doesn't care about his personal image. Whereas like a character like Matsumoto or like Byakuya especially, right? They have this sort of presentation to them that takes on a little bit more of like the nicer look, that they take a little bit more time to present themselves in this way, whereas Zaraki doesn't care about that at all. And so that said, you have to wonder like why he has the few bits of ornamentation he does, right? Why does he have these little bells that each of his spikes of hair end in? And I love that he has this crazy spiky hair. It's kind of nonsense. Like, I highly recommend going and watching, and there will be spoilers, so maybe only watch this if you don't want to, like if you don't care about spoilers, if you've already read the series. But if you go watch the Bleach rock opera musicals, which those exist by the way, and I will cover them once they aren't spoilers for where we are in the manga. But if you go watch those, they always get a pretty good actor to play Zaraki Kenpachi, and his hair is ludicrous, like in live action. It's absolutely like a silly hairpiece. Just like kind of imagining this in any way. It's not a way that anyone other than maybe someone that's absolutely like a punk sort of like in like going through like some sort of underground show or something, you know not a hairstyle you'd expect from any sane person, certainly. But I think that sort of jagged hairstyle, the way that it almost looks like blades coming out, I think helps to sort of set Kenpachi apart. Of course, he's also very big and tall. There's that to him. He's got this huge scar down his face. He's got this eye patch on that goes down into being this collar. And so you really get the sense that like this is a guy that's been torn apart, that's been in a lot of fights, that's got this very like jagged sort of expression. He's very wolfish. He's got the huge canines, And so, yeah, he is the captain of the 11th Company, which is the militaristic sort of fighting company. He's probably has a bone to pick with Ichigo because, of course, Ikaku and Yumachika were both in the 11th Company, and they were both almost killed by Ichigo and his friends. But then also, Ichigo and his friends have been just tearing through 11th Company people. So Zaraki is itching for a fight, not just because he enjoys battle, but maybe there's a sense of obligation to his men. Who knows? But nevertheless, yeah, he is a striking kind of figure, and I think really represents maybe a full-on sort of martial opponent, which a lot of the opponents that we've been getting for Ichigo have been getting kind of like different ways of fighting him, right? That like whenever he was fighting Urahara had all these different techniques, right? This different skill and all of that to train him with, and then fighting Ikaku, Ikaku had like the strange kind of weapon mix up, and so did Renji to an extent, but Renji had, it was a matter of resolve. And so Kenpachi represents a different kind of enemy, one that is absolutely, just here to fight, not for the sake of anything other than the fight itself, you know. But also he is an enemy that is presented as a ferocious sort of like martial battler, like so maybe an extension of what we got with Ikaku to a degree, but we have yet to see exactly how Kenpachi's Zanpakuto works, exactly how this fight with Kenpachi will go down, but nevertheless, certainly proves to be like just a powerful obstacle for Ichigo to overcome. Um, and so, yeah, we're left to wonder kind of if Ichigo can do anything in this fight, if he should flee like Yorichi advised, or what will exactly go down. And then we have to also worry about, of course, Ichigo's allies, right? Both Ganju and Hanataro, who definitely can't keep up. Finally, of course, if you were wondering where Yachiru, the vice captain, was, she was on Kenpachi's back the entire time. Pretty cute. So yeah, I do think this chapter is pretty good as an initial confrontation between the two. It really highlights just like how on a different level Zaraki is, how bloodthirsty, how just like predatory he is. I like absolutely love the panel with the skeletons, closing in around Ichigo. I think this is like my favorite, definitely my favorite panel of this entire chapter, but maybe even my favorite panel, like in the last, like maybe even in the arc so far. Who knows? But fantastic panel, especially like Ichigo kind of running for his life, as he's unable to escape. And you'll often get a lot of this skeletal imagery tied to Zaraki. There's the Gashi Dakuro, which is a formidable sort of yokai, um, but worth mentioning because I think stylistically is sort of attached to Kenpachi, um, and in general, like or Kasha Dokuro, something like that. Let me make sure because the idea is that it's this yokai that's this just massive skeleton, um, that is essentially it's interesting that it's often tied to Kenpachi, but it makes maybe a little bit of sense because the Gashadokuro are these spirits that take the form of giant skeletons that are very large, that are created from the ghosts of people who died in battle, right? Um, some people say it's the ghosts of people who died of starvation or disgraced soldiers, even, but that their desire for revenge is what drives them, and they try to feed on the living, um, but there's like a bloodthirst to them, and that they're these just indestructible sort of like just giant skeletal monsters composed of the bones of everyone that they have already killed, right? Um, and so Yeah, it's a prominent sort of yokai. I mean, big skeleton. Big skeleton is not particularly hard to imagine why people like big skeleton as a yokai, but that's been around for a while. Um, there's a bunch of different myths. You can do your own homework. But the reason why I feel like that's typically tied to Kenpachi is there's like this, and I think this is something that's worth and like thinking about, is these are soul reapers, right? They are these psychopomp characters. There are these spirits of death. And more they'll actually, these supernatural elements will get tied to different mythologies. And so I think it's really cool that he's evocative of this like spiritual sort of yokai that is this restless sort of violence craving creature. And if you think, he's not all that different from a hollow, he does just want to enjoy a fight. And certainly the Dokuro sounds like a hollow, right? This restless undead. Um, though different from Kenpachi in other ways. So yeah, you will notice there's always kind of skeletal imagery um, evoked with Kenpachi, and this is the first that we're really getting, as far as I am aware. There might have been a little bit before, but yeah, it's cool stuff. It's really neat, and notably will come up more and more and more. So yeah, exciting to see that this early. I didn't even remember this panel existed, and I did want to take the time to talk about this panel to highlight that, of course. Um, this kind of inhuman mass of bones. I love that it's got like the crazy scythe fingered arm coming out of its back, as well as the regular arm with the blade, and it's just got this whirlwind of bones that aren't even anatomically correct, but sort of just ribbon out from the ink of the back of the page. I love it. Yeah, no, this is really good panel. Really, really captures the sensation that Ichigo's feeling. Otherwise, yeah, all in all, I think it's a solid chapter. I mean, the beginning of the chapter does focus on a little bit of intrigue. Like I said, we are brought back to Momo. We do get that interaction with Matsumoto to understand a little bit more of her and her situation, investigating this alongside Hitsugaya. Um, you know, and then of course Hinamori Momo. We get a little bit of follow up on her, and so she learns some more information, but we don't have it. So there's always that sort of, Kubo's constantly playing with like who has what information, and if the reader has that information as well, and really trying to drive these sort of ironies, but also these sort of mysteries. And I think that ends up being pretty compelling stuff too. And maybe what a lot of people like about the Soul Society arc that in other arcs isn't as present, because Soul Society is so much of an intrigue arc. And so I can understand if somebody maybe felt the other arcs are a little less compelling because of that, right? That said, I think there's always some level of information play that Kubo likes to engage in as a writer, and it might be not to this explicit of a level, but there's always something going on, and I do appreciate that. Nevertheless, that's all I have to really say about 103, about Dominion. I do have some talk about spoilers, so we'll be talking about spoilers now. Look forward to that. And by look forward to that, I mean, hey, let's talk about spoilers. So, I'm getting into how this connects to the rest of the manga. I had talked about if Hitsugaya had read this letter or not, and I know that he probably hasn't, because doesn't it implicate him? I'm pretty sure it implicates that it was Hitsugaya who killed, uh, Aizen, right? I think that's the whole point, is that it implicates Hitsugaya, and then Momo wants to kill Hitsugaya, and then maybe there's like this thing about it being a fake letter written by Gin. I don't even. There's so much like screwing Momo around, but yeah, I know that it just exists to cause shit. Which, I mean, Aizen's literally like the people that Aizen reaches out to. Everyone Aizen reaches out to, he's just trying to manipulate them into causing more chaos. And that's just so that he has more of a smokescreen thrown up as he enacts his plan, right? I mean, I guess he's got control over the Central 46, so it's like, well, while everybody's running around trying to figure out one thing or another, Aizen, who has faked his death, has excuse to not be around for this Ryoka invasion. And that really comes down to, like, do you think Aizen planned the Ryoka invasion? Right? You have to wonder about that. It's like, I am kind of the mind that he didn't. That the Ryoka invasion was something that he didn't have it as a contingency, and that it was a play made on Kisuke's part to keep the Hogekyo out of Aizen's hands, and to also give Ichigo something very tangible to fight towards, to grow leaps and bounds by. Because, as we know, the Hogekyo manifests your desires so long as you can achieve them, and putting Ichigo in a place where he has these very lofty desires, but is also constantly... I mean, we know that Ichigo can achieve them, being that he has so much latent power within him, right? So, I always... like... You know, there's like, oh man, how much does Aizen plan from the very beginning of the series, Ichigo's birth? I don't think Aizen planned a number of things. Like, for instance, I'm pretty sure that... because I'm trying to think about it all through. Because it's like, Rukia gets sent to Karakura-san, and I think her being on mission there might just, I as much as I'm like, oh yeah, well that's just how it is, I feel like that's got to be maybe a manipulation either by Kisuke or Urahara. I figure Kisuke or Urahara, look at me. Either Aizen or Urahara, and I think it's by Urahara, because Urahara wants to specifically set her up with that different Gigai, and eventually, and basically try to keep the Hogekyo out of Aizen's hands. And so then Aizen pulls the strings to have Byakuya and Renji go back and capture her for the execution, not just as a test, because both of them have personal connection to her, to see what her loyalties lie, but then also because they absolutely will get it done. I mean, it's a bit overkill. And I think at this point, Aizen is not aware that Ichigo has gained Soul Reaper powers and Hollow powers eventually. Right? Because Aizen's certainly got tabs on Ichigo. I mean, he knows that Ichigo is the child born of a Soul Reaper captain, one of the last of the Quincy, and is going to be a Fullbringer, even if he's not aware of what Fullbringers really are. Aizen's aware of Ichigo as a very special kind of person of interest. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much he had a hand in getting Rukia there and interacting with Ichigo, but certainly I think Kisuke does, for sure. I mean, Kisuke already has the uniform and papers to set Rukia up at Karakura High, right? Anyway, the whole point of all of this is that essentially I don't think that Aizen planned for the Ryoka invasion, and therefore is trying to do everything that he can to put up a smokescreen, like, oh, well, I'm dead, so, you don't have to worry about Aizen being around to deal with this invasion, while he, manipulates the Central 46 and tries to get everything in line so that Rukia gets executed so that he can bounce with his Hogekyu. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Let me know. But yeah, this is just another one of those sorts of things, right? This is just him causing trouble. Getting back to the rest of the crew, getting back to Zaraki closing in, getting to that undead sort of thing. I love that connection to Zaraki as the undead as the skeleton. As we know, his volume is the undead. And yeah, he will consistently be given skeleton imagery. I like that comes up, in droves in the Unohana fight and the 1,000-Year Blood War. I think that's really cool. And ultimately, I mean, I'm trying to think, not Byakuya, what am I saying? Kenpachi Zaraki, he has, a ton of, yokai sort of imagery. It tends to be, with, skeletons and the Gashadokuro, but his Bankai specifically is very like Oni, right? So it's curious. I wonder exactly like what like Kubo was always trying to kind of roll like a sort of like powerful sort of raging bloodthirsty yokai imagery into his deal or what it was. Nevertheless, like I was talking about the Gacha Dokuro, right? The idea of it being like this kind of hungry spirit, this spirit of those who died, you know, like of with this great hunger in them, or who were deprived, even just like Kenpachi being this, you know, aimless sort of lost child, and the Rukon guy. Kind of interesting how a little bit of that maybe links up, but anyway. Um, Yeah. Otherwise, I don't. You know, there's not a ton here. I do like that Ichigo remembers this stab, and I think this stab is specifically significant for Ichigo to remember. And maybe this is not so much of a spoiler thing, but is exactly how he gets stabbed by Yakuya the first time that he is pretty much nearly killed in his entire life, as far as we know. Like it reminds him of being stabbed through his soul sleep, right? So it's like that frightening. And then the other kind of cool thing is that we know that this sword, and I guess this is the reason why I remember to talk about it in spoilers and why I didn't mention it beforehand, is we know that this sword is not Kenpachi's Zanpakuto because it doesn't have the chipping and like, you know, battle damage to it. So this is actually Ichigo just picturing a sword stabbing through him and might be more reminiscent of Sinban Sakura. Or, you know, Sealed State Sinban Sakura, right? The Zanpakuto. Um, so yeah, I think that's really cool that that's like the imagery evoked there for Ichigo. Otherwise, yeah, you know, that's all. That's all, folks. I love Yuchiro hanging on because, of course, Yuchiro is always there. Because, of course, she is a part of Zaraki. She is her spirit, and so she's always going to be there with him. Even if, you know, the joke is that she's just hanging on his back, right? She's not always maybe manifest. Although I'd imagine that she probably is because she's operate independent of him. I figure, but I don't think we ever see them apart. So. I'm thinking it's maybe more of a Lily Net situation than it is, you know, like just like a manifested kind of spirit thing. But what are your thoughts? How do you interpret the whole Yuchiro situation? Because she does disappear whenever he uses his release of his sword, so she's not entirely 100% like physical. But then again, no one is because they're all spirits. Anyway. That's it for this one, folks. Thank you so much for watching. I hope the new manga viewer is nice. I hope you like it. I can change it to have like black backgrounds, but I think I'm going to go with the white backgrounds for now. Actually, I have dynamic, so it's actually a black background. So like if I go back a few pages, let me let's forward. Let me go back to the previous chapter. Yeah, so like see it's dynamic. It'll do the darker sort of outlines on the darker pages. So I think these two will also be darker. So yeah, I don't know. Let me know. I mean, as of recording these videos, you know, comment sections are pretty dry. But if anyone does let me know their preferences one way or another, then you will be the lucky few who get catered to. Nevertheless, thank you so much for watching. Be it the day this releases, a week after, months after, or even years. I really do appreciate you taking your time to revisit Bleach along with me. It means the world to me. And I hope that you're enjoying this series, and I hope that you're enjoying Bleach. It's really one of my favorites. That all said, please give the video a like for getting this far into it. You know, subscribe or whatever's going on in, you know, like 20 years from now. I don't know. Do people still like videos anymore? Rate it 5 stars. Another way you can always support me is via Patreon. You can support me for as much or as little as you like. It doesn't matter how much you support me for. So long as you are giving me support on Patreon, your name will appear here in the credits along with the other supporters. And I do want to give thanks to those who are supporting. Thank you very much. As always, I am Carker Gold, reminding you that spirits are forever with you. Stay gold.